Imagine that you borrowed some money from a friend. To pay him back, you get a part-time job, but that means you have less time to focus on your schoolwork, and your grades start to slip. Soon, you find yourself in trouble. Believe it or not, nations sometimes have a similar problem, just on a much larger scale. Today, we're looking into the way foreign debt and investments impacted 19th century Mexico. To aid our investigation, we have a big event to cover, the Mexican-American War of 1846, and a few guiding questions to help us along the way. What caused the Mexican-American War? What were the different crises Mexico faced after the Mexican-American War? And how did late 19th century imperialism impact Mexico? Our big picture question is, can a nation really be independent if it relies on foreign investment? Mexico began the 19th century as New Spain, a Spanish colony. In 1810, Mexico declared its independence from Spain and in 1821 defeated Spain in its war for independence, securing a nation-state. But as the 19th century unfolded, Mexican sovereignty would be limited by manifest destiny and imperialism, leading once again to revolution. The Mexican-American War was fought between Mexico and the United States from 1846 to 1848, mostly in central Mexico. But before we get there, let's see what led up to it. In the late 1820s, American settlers began immigrating to Texas, Mexico's northeastern state. Does the name Texas sound familiar? Yep, it was not originally part of the United States. But there was a small problem. On second thought, no, it was a big problem. Why? Well, these Texan settlers were part of America's belief that it must expand westward, a period you know as manifest destiny, making them a part of America's cotton economy. When Mexico abolished slavery in 1829, Texans resisted and eventually declared independence in 1835, which America quickly recognized. The first cause of the Mexican-American War was America's recognition of Texas independence. Why? Texan independence violated Mexico's sovereignty over the territory, and they felt that the U.S. was responsible for encouraging it. To understand why, put yourself in Mexico's shoes. You've watched American settlers move westward toward Texas, and within a few years, those same American settlers started a revolution. Instead of taking your side, the U.S. recognized Texan independence in 1837, violating your authority to govern yourself. Let's keep walking in Mexico's shoes. Now it's the 1840s and Texas is gone. But even more of your nation lies on America's path west. What do you know? In 1845, American immigrants began to settle in California, and Texas is the newest state in America. Just ask yourself, what would you be thinking if you were Mexico? Here we go again. The second cause of the Mexican-American War was the United States annexation of Texas in 1845 because it increased tensions between the two nations. Why? Well, the United States tried to buy Texas from Mexico decades earlier, making annexation seem planned. This was a slap in the face for Mexico, and Mexico knew America wanted California, so Mexico had to take a stand, contributing to the third cause of the war. The third cause of the Mexican-American War was the border dispute between Mexico and the United States because it sparked armed conflict. Wait a minute, why would such a small area trigger a war? Again, imagine you're a congressman in Mexico in 1845. There is no way you can allow America to have the area, not after all the previous insults and violations of your country's sovereignty. Let's see how the two nations handled things. In 1846, both nations sent troops into the disputed territory. Fights broke out, leading to an American declaration of war in 1846. Who was to blame? Well, you'll find out more in your PDF. Before we find out how the war ended, let's get our first guiding question. What caused the Mexican-American War? The war ended in just under 2 years, with the United States victorious. In 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the Mexican-American War and initiated the first post-war crisis. The first post-war crisis was Mexico's inability to pay foreign debt to European nations. During their wars for independence from Spain, Mexico borrowed heavily from England and France. According to the treaty, Mexico lost all its northern territories to the United States. It's estimated that these areas contain $200 million worth of economic output. Add the destruction brought by war and Mexico was broke, triggering the next post-war crisis. The second post-war crisis was a series of political conflicts that created a civil war. In 1858, Benito Juárez became president of Mexico as the head of the new Liberal Party. The Liberal Party seized lands held by the Catholic Church and indigenous peoples, selling them to private investors in order to solve the national debt problems caused by the war. That didn't go over well with everyone. Conservatives launched an attack on the Liberal government, known as the War of Reforms. It lasted from 1858 to 1861. Benito's Liberal Party defeated the Conservatives, but the war was so financially devastating it triggered another crisis. The third crisis Mexico faced after the war was the French invasion and dictatorship in 1863. Wait, what? Okay, I'll explain. When the War of Reforms was over, Benito Juárez governed a nation in ruins. He announced that Mexico was too broke to pay on foreign debts, upsetting the European lenders. The French decided to take action. In 1863, the French invaded Mexico and set up a dictator. History is wild, but let's stop for a second. Remember the Monroe Doctrine from the last lesson? We can use it to predict how America would react to the French invasion. In 1866, the United States helped Juárez oust the French, paving the way for an era of American imperialism in Mexico. According to the Monroe Doctrine, only the United States gets to invade Latin American countries. Stop the presses. We need our next guiding question. What were the different crises Mexico faced after the Mexican-American War? The crises left Mexico in need of a little help, and foreign investors came knocking at the door. Porfirio Diaz, president from 1876 to 1910, oversaw massive impacts on Mexico. How? He removed restrictions on foreign investments, opening the door wide open to American economic imperialism. The first impact of imperialism in the late 19th century was the rapid industrialization of the Mexican economy. The United States invested in the railroad industry first because having rail infrastructure was the backbone of an industrial society. When Diaz took office in 1876, there were only 410 miles of railroad tracks. By the end of his reign, there were 12,000 miles. American investment spread to all the major sectors of Mexico's economy, triggering the next impact. The second impact of late 19th century imperialism in Mexico was a transfer of wealth from the Mexican state to foreigners. The Mexican government paid for most of the economic activities and gave tax exemptions to foreign companies and individuals. What's the big deal in helping businesses out? Well, these were not Mexican-owned businesses, so these policies transferred Mexican money into foreign pockets. The more that Americans owned in Mexico, the less Mexico actually controlled their country, leading to the third impact. The third impact of late 19th century imperialism in Mexico was a loss of sovereignty due to the control that foreigners had on the economy. In 1906, United States troops were used to put down a strike at an American-owned mine in northern Mexico. A small political class willing to impose American imperialism dominated the Mexican government, triggering public resentment. The final impact of late 19th century imperialism was a decade of revolution, starting in 1910. But that story is for our next lesson. Let's get to the final guiding question. How did late 19th century imperialism impact Mexico? The Mexican-American War was caused by American expansion westward, popularly known as Manifest Destiny. After the war, Mexico lacked the ability to pay its debt, igniting a political crisis that eventually required American assistance. The end of the 19th century was marked by American imperialism, reducing Mexican sovereignty. So the moral of the story is you have to be careful who you borrow from and how much you borrow. Bet you didn't think you could get such sound financial advice from a history class, but we've been telling you history is everywhere.
Hey!